Oh, hi. Hey, let's take another look at what God wants to reveal to us. There's so much tucked away in what seems to just be Old Testament stories, a history book. But Genesis is not a history book. The history is accurate and true about real people, real things, and real places, but it is written and preserved to reveal things to us. So, what in the world does God want to reveal in a story like this? Well, let's take a look at it. In Genesis chapter 14, it's kind of a crazy thing. There are four kings in the north up in Shinar, modern Babylon, or what is normally referred to as Babylon, and five kings in the south, down around the Dead Sea and the Jordan and Jordan Valley and all that area. And there's going to be a battle, and we're going to read about that. But it's not just about the battle. The writer doesn't spend a lot of time talking about warfare. He says it happened, and he tells us why. But he has something he wants for us to see about God and about faith and those things. So take a look at it with me. It's in Genesis 14, and the first section of 14 names all the kings and the places, and there's a bunch of dynamics and politics in this. I want to pick this story up at verse 11. The four kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. He had just moved toward Sodom. Now he's living in Sodom. Verse 13. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre. The Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abraham heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Now that's one of the tribal allotments, and half of the tribe of Dan moved way up to the toe of Mount Hermon. Verse 15, during the night, Abraham divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobeth, north of Damascus. Now, wow. Now, these are real places. I've had the privilege of tromping around over these areas, and fortunately, I was riding in an air-conditioned bus. These boys were carrying armament, and they were running afoot more than 150 miles, and I understand that the route actually took them from Jordan up to Jerusalem. So they ran, and they did this in a 2-day period. And it was in the night of that 2-day period that David divided his troops into two groups. It's fascinating. Okay, let's look at the detail. First of all, it references Sodom and Gomorrah, and they lose all of their food, and the kings carry away the loot. Apparently there were some women and children, and then who knows what else besides food, but maybe some armaments and what have you. They took all the good stuff and carried it off in lieu of taxes. Now, what I read in here is that when Abraham heard that his relative, that is Lot, his nephew, had been taken captive, he called out 318 trained men born in his household. Now, he had a lot of servants, but he had 318 young trained men. He had his own militia, folks, his own little army. Now, that's not a big army to go against 5 kings, or 4 kings, I guess it is, but it is a significant group of people. Now, since this isn't just a history book, first thing I want to just get out before us is, what in the world is the author, and I think the author's Moses, wanting to reveal? What has God inspired him to say to us through a story like this? Well, here are the broad themes. This event has international significance, but the author is going to tie it to Abraham's faith, to God's power, and the awesomeness of trusting God. And then there's a lot of geography involved here that is part of the whole story of God's promise to Abraham. The other thing is the secret of living in the land in peace. The word peace would be shalom, which is bigger than just peace. It's everything for your good and well-being. And so shalom is part of this story. So we get these 5 themes: international importance, Abraham's faith, God's power, the geography of the land, and it's all the way from south to north in this case. And then the last one is the secret of dwelling in the land in peace. The fact that Abraham is said to be dwelling at the great trees of Mamre, verse 3, second part of it, actually ties the previous chapters to this in the mention of the trees of Mamre. And so chapter 13 and chapter 14 are not disconnected. They are intentionally connected. Abraham is back where he belongs, and he is a worshiper. He has built an altar, and he has called upon the name of his God. And he is living under the blessing of God in a place that God had promised to give him. And God had taken him to this land to show the whole thing to him. Now he's going to get a quick view of it in a 2-day run from south to north. But he is living in peace, and he is enjoying what we would call the blessing of God. That's always important, and that's what the Bible's all about. The God who created us and loves us and redeems us back to himself wants us to live well. He wants us to enjoy shalom. And the word is used sometimes very lightly, but it is true. That's what it's about. So, the God Abraham worshiped at his altar in Hebron, and also between Bethel and Ai, is said to be the creator of heaven and earth. So this is Elohim. He is the creator God, the one who created and sustains everything incidentally. And Abraham, this great man of faith, is able to live peaceably in the land to which God has brought him. And he needs nothing from any of the kings of the area. He's not caught up in the politics, and he's not subject to the taxes and all of those kind of things. And the story is going to tell us that those who join Abram will share in his blessing. Those who separate from him or remove themselves from him also remove themselves from God's protection and blessing. That's what the story is going to be all about. So, first of all, we understand that calamity is sure to befall evildoers. The Bible tells us that, and it's a principle all the way through Scripture. And so it is that occasionally the righteous need to go rescue those who are doing evil, have separated themselves from the blessing of God. So the 5 kings of the south had been subjected to the 4 kings of the north up in Shinar, it's called. We would know that as Babylon. And they were supposed to be paying tribute to them, taxes that is. So the reason for the war is a rebellion. So the attack with the kings, the 4 kings from the north, and they were probably the stronger and maybe better equipped. That the attack was swift and effective, and the focus is not on the war. It doesn't tell us how the battle went, except that there was a battle and it did go and it was over quickly, and then there was a long chase and rout. Abraham is pictured now as living peacefully in the hill country. Lot had chosen the lush valley of the Jordan, and he left the barren hillsides to Abraham, where sheep incidentally thrive. So Abraham is living peacefully in the hill country, and he is totally unaffected by the politics going on in the whole world, okay, way up north in Shinar and all the way down into Sodom and Gomorrah and down through the Jordan Rift. Abraham is a picture of those who enjoy the unfailing blessing of God. Lot, on the other hand, has moved into the city, into Sodom, and now is subject to the dynamics of its politics, that is, taxes and tribute, and then rebellion and the subsequent war. Isaiah, God's prophet, in chapter 57 of his book, said, "There is no peace, says my God, for the wicked." And here it is, illustrated and lived out before us in this chapter 14 of the book of Genesis. Now, I tell people that the names of places and the names of people, the fruits and everything about Israel is used as revelation. So there's probably revelation in the names of the kings and the places they're from, the kingdoms that they rule over. I don't have it all worked out. I don't understand it. I'd like to sit down with some rabbis and just have them tell me so that I could understand clearly and simply. I like the kind of a thumbnail sketch and all of this stuff, but here are their names, Amraphel, and that may mean one that darkens counsel. That's kind of interesting. And he's from Shinar. Now we know that as being the southern part of the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates. It's identified as Sumer, or we would know it as Babylon. Another king is Arioch, and that means Lion of God. Isn't that an interesting name? And just kind of like an English king, but he's the king of Elazar, and that means revolting from God. So there's some significance in that name. And then there's the Kedalamar. That means servant of Lagumaru, and that is an Elamite deity. And he's the king of Elam, which may mean forever or eternal. That's up in what we would know as modern southern Iran. And then there's the king Tidal, Tidal it's probably called, the way they pronounce it. And that would mean that breaks the yoke or knowledge of elevation, perhaps. And he's the king of Goim. Now, Goim spelled with a Y, G-O-Y-M, is Gentiles, and this may mean simply heathen, but they're non-Jewish at any rate. Those are the 4 kings of the north. And then the 5 kings of the south are Bera, which means to carry or to bear, and he's king of Sodom, which would mean wicked or corrupt place. Bersha is another king, and that would mean an evil or a son who beholds. Kind of hard to know which of these meanings to take. He's king of Gomorrah, which means to be deep or copious, like water might be. Another king is Shinab, means father of changing, and he's the king of Admah. That means earthy, could mean red or bloody. And then the 4th king is Shemeber, and that would mean name of force or name of the strong. And he's the king of Zebolim. Notice the plural there with the I-M ending. And that would represent deer, goats, gazelles, or roes, those kind of animals. And then there's another king who's not named. But there are 5 kings. This one's not named, so his name would not have added to the story. It's not included. He's the king, however, of Bela, which means a swallowing, a devouring, in the sense of ruin. Later, this place becomes known as Zoar, which means a place of refuge. And Lot is going to ask for permission to flee to Zoar, which would have been known at this time probably as Bela. Now, in the days of this Amraphel, the first king mentioned, king of Shinar, there were a lot of things going on. Some have tried to associate this with Hammurabi and the first lawgiver, but it seems that recent scholarship has kind of rejected that, and there's a whole lot of speculation about just who this was and why he was named what he was named, what the name might have been in Hebrew or Akkadian or whatever. It may have been even Nimrod, and he was up there in Shinar, was a key figure in all of this. We also know that one of Ham's sons, that is Cush, went to Shinar, and another Mizraim also went to Egypt. And we know that these two sons, two grandsons then of Noah, one goes out over to the Babylon area and one goes down into Egypt. And so Ham is Noah's middle son. And Jewish literature says that Nimrod is the one who started the rebellion. Now, what kind of a rebellion? Was a rebellion against God? Okay. A lot of things he's tied to the building of a city and by inference to the building of the Tower of Babel. Shinar was where Terah, Abraham's father, had lived and left Ur of the Chaldees, and he got as far as Haran, and for some reason he delayed his trip, settled down there, and that's where he died. It wasn't until Terah died that Abraham was free to obey God's call off into a land that he would show him. But all of this tells us that what we're talking about implies global events, and the geography's big, and there are lots of groups. Now, the kings probably didn't have large kingdoms, but they were kingdoms nonetheless. Down in Sodom, Sodom became a big city. It was the biggest city, apparently, in the Middle East at one time, back in Abraham's day. And so there are some conceptions that artists give us of what things might have looked like down there in Sodom, and it's kind of fun to take a look at those pictures, whether they're correct or not, I don't know. But Lot is the one who chose the lush green valley and the big city life and moved into the city as he separated himself from Abraham. He moves east, it says, into or towards Sodom and then eventually into it. And east is always away from God, figuratively in the Bible. So here's a picture of the lush green valley of the Jordan around the north end of the Dead Sea. And Lot chose the lush green valley, the cushy, comfy life, and he left the barren hillsides to Abram. And so Abram just joyfully moved up there where sheep thrive. Now, the narrative before us here in chapter 14 focuses a larger view, and it wants to show us the difference between the blessing of God and the absence of it. Now, you know, in my culture right now, everybody thinks that the object is to make a good wage, a good living, and to have a nice, comfortable home and lifestyle and all of that. And then we talk about things like white privilege and a bunch of crazy notions. Actually, what we're seeing sometimes is the blessing of God and the absence of it. The problem today, the largest percentage of the problem, now I know there are some people who have mental illness in the homeless situation we have in the cities across our land, but by and large it's lifestyle, and it represents simply the absence of the blessing of God. I'm using an illustration where two people come with their cups and they lay them on the parapet of the well. One puts his cup right side up and one sets it down upside down, and a lady comes and draws water, and she generously pours on both cups some of this rich, sweet, cold well water. One cup gets filled and the other cup stays empty. And the question is, which way do you have your cup? Because if you're going to enjoy the blessing of God, you got to have your cup right side up. And to disbelieve and be in rebellion to him only leaves your cup empty. Anyway, Lot separated himself from Abram and then moved into the city of Sodom, and trouble set in. And this is the way the story goes so often in the human experiment and in the journey of life. Lot then needs the intercession of Abraham, and that's going to happen not only here, but it'll happen again in a little bit. It is said in chapter 20 of Genesis that Abraham is a prophet, and that he will pray for you and you will live. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen here, even though it's focused clearly in a verse in chapter 20. It's amazing that Abram had and was able to assemble 318 trained young men for battle. His little army. He had a little army, and he assembled them, and away they went in pursuit of the folks who had decimated the kingdoms of the south. Now, it's amazing that such a small group could defeat a larger, better equipped army. But, that's the story of Gideon also. So the focus is not on the number of soldiers, it's on the power of God. And what happens when you dare to believe him and live in obedience before him. Now here's a map of the area that we're talking about. So Israel is in the light brown there, and the word Israel is down in what's called the Negev, and that's down in the area where Abram was living, close to Hebron, a little north of Beersheba. But they start off from there, and they run up to the north, up to Dan, and then beyond that, and they go about 30 miles beyond Damascus, according to verse 15. Now, I draw a straight line. They didn't run a straight line. They actually apparently went up from Jericho toward Jerusalem and then ran in the high country from there on in pursuit. We read in verse 15, during the night, Abram divided his men to attack them and routed them, pursuing them as far as Habath, north of Damascus. That's about 30 miles north of Damascus. And I estimate a straight line would have been 150 miles. It may have been as much as 200 miles that these men ran. And it's over a period of a little more than 24 hours. It's 2 daylight days and a night. And so it's a good long run. On his way back from the victory with all the loot and with Lot, surely Abraham stopped, perhaps to buy some supplies, rest, and restock at Dan. There was a city up there. Today it's a ruin. It's called Tel Dan because it's a mound of ruins, and they have been excavating up there. And there's an archway, and I have it here in the picture, and this archway is called the Gate of Abraham, or sometimes it's called Abraham's Gate, because ancient history says that Abraham and his entourage actually walked under this archway. So this archway is now about 4,000 years old up there at Tel Dan. And history records the event in various ways, extra-biblical. So Abraham goes back down toward where he lived. And when he gets down to about Jerusalem, to what's called the Valley of Shiva, it means the King's Valley, the king of Sodom and Melchizedek, the priest of God, and the king of Salem meet him there. And the king of Sodom, as well as Melchizedek, are going to have a significant role now. And I'll bring Melchizedek in a later look at things. But the king of Sodom offers Abraham all the spoil. Okay, it's his spoil that Abraham's bringing back along with Lot, and the king says, no, you can keep it. I will give it to you. But Abraham rejected any reward for what he had done, except for what his men had eaten and what they had taken. Because Abraham felt that his reward would come from Yahweh, the God of covenant in the Bible, the creator of heaven and earth. And Melchizedek hosts Abraham with bread and wine. I always thought that was a Passover event, and apparently it predates the Passover by at least 1,000 years and seems to have been a priestly act that is relevant and has significance in a moment like this. And there we have record that they acknowledge that it was God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, who delivered Abram from his adversaries, who gave him victory over the kings. So it's the power of God and Abraham's faith in this God that is of significance in the story. Now, there's another little detail here. Abraham's refusal to take the spoil reflects God's law, which was later given through Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 20. It's summarized this way. Abraham lived by these rules, and even though the rules were not yet given, he seems to have been able to live it out of his relationship with God. And these rules have to do with instructions regarding wars with foreign nations. And it goes this way. Don't hesitate to go to war against armies greater than yours. Reject the spoils. And don't depend on what men can give you. Abraham refuses to take any of the spoils from these heathens, in other words, according to Deuteronomy 20:17, that's the way they were to do it. The author of this narrative seems to want to show his readers that Abraham's faith was such that he kept God's commands even though they hadn't been given yet. In other words, the law of God seems to have been written on his heart. It was codified into personal living. That's amazing. Now, Jeremiah talks about this and talks about, Ezekiel also talks about how God's law will be written on the heart. But here it was written on the heart before it was even given. So what we understand is that Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. Okay, the story is not going to end there. There's going to be more. And the focus is going to shift from a global event to the fate of Lot. Well, Lot didn't lose everything in this. He almost did, but later he's going to lose everything. And Abraham intervenes this time, but he's going to have to intervene another time a couple of chapters later. I want you to understand that in this area that we're talking about, where close to where Abraham lived and the area where Lot moved to, Sodom, they have been excavating what they think is the city of Sodom. And there is a layer of ancient earth that archaeologists now claim to have found evidence of an apocalyptic event like the Bible speaks of. So there's melted rooftops, disintegrated pottery, unusual patterns in the rock formations, and these are associated with extreme heat, just like the Bible talks about. But for another six centuries, there's not going to be a settlement here. Later, they will resettle this area, and it will again be inhabited. But we'll get into Sodom and Gomorrah in a subsequent look at another revelation. But I thought I'd just share this one with you today. Now, people ask, okay, where can I get more? Well, I have these meditations with Ron. You can find it on Meditating with Ron. And it's kind of a devotional 3 days a week. Right now we're in the Lenten season, and so those have to do with Jesus going to Jerusalem to finish the work he came to do. The redeeming work of dying in our place on a cruel cross. And I have some books that are available if you'd write me at my email, drronhunter@gmail.com. I'd be glad to let you in on a book or two if you'd like to have those. God bless you. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to share this with you.